computer-programmed reality. We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Well, good afternoon. How is everybody? Robert Phoenix here, broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg, Texas. And we're running a little bit behind today, but we're in the ballpark. Gentlemen, start your engines. There's a lot happening, and first of all, I want to just point a little spotlight on the island of Hawaii, where Mount Kilauea has decided to blow its top, and there are evacuations going on there. That's a pretty powerful event, to say the least. And don't know quite the extent of where it's going from here. There was a fairly significant amount of plume ash that was fired up into the atmosphere. Let's see what one of the major news services has to say. This is from an hour ago with CBS News. I'm going to read this to you in case you haven't heard. Curtain of fire. Hawaii volcano spews lava, forces residents to flee. Nearly 1,500 residents were ordered to evacuate after Hawaii's Kilauea volcano erupted. Volcano officials said they couldn't predict how long the eruption might last. Well, this is tricky because they're on the Ring of Fire. And these volcanoes are connected to the various islands and also to the Ring of Fire, which is the seismic, the tectonic ring that basically encircles the entirety of the Pacific Ocean. Japan, Hawaii is definitely a part of it, up through the northern areas of Russia, Siberia, Kamchatka, all the way across to Alaska, and then down the west coast of the United States, and all the way down the west coast of South America, and then back up again with some areas in the South Pacific that are connected to the Ring of Fire. So it's not just a localized event. It is a vastly regional, oceanic seismic event. So let's keep going on here. That prompted Governor David Ige to declare a state of emergency in affected areas, activate the National Guard with evacuations, and provide security to about 770 structures left empty when residents sought shelter. There were no immediate reports of injuries, but at least 100 people were in shelters Friday, with many more evacuees believed to be staying with relatives and friends. Hawaii County officials said steam and lava poured out of a crack in Leilani Estates, which is near the town of Pahoa on the Big Island. There were no immediate reports of injuries. Footage shown on local television showed lava spurting into the sky from a crack in the road. Aerial drone footage showed a line of lava snaking through a forest. CBS Honolulu affiliate KGMB-TV reported lava was shooting some 100 feet in the air and nearing several homes. Fire officials detected extremely high levels of dangerous sulfur dioxide in the air, the station said. Resident Jeremiah Osuna captured drone footage of the lava burning through the trees, a scene he described as a curtain of fire. It sounded like if you were to put a bunch of rocks into a dryer, turn it on as high as you could just smell the sulfur burning. Smell sulfur in burning trees and underbrush and stuff. He told Honolulu television station KHON. Going on with the story here. The U.S. Geological Survey said new ground cracks were reported Thursday afternoon. Hot vapor emerged from a crack and spattering lava began to erupt. Scientists in areas downslope of the erupting vent were at risk of being covered by lava. Leilani Estates appeared to be at greatest risk, but scientists said new vents and outbreaks could occur, and it's not possible to say where. Ige also urged Big Island residents to stay calm and continue to stay tuned to emergency alerts. Just smoke a little of that Pakalolo. That'll help you stay calm. And follow it up with a nice big thick glass of kava kava. That'll get you through just about anything. The residents were fleeing with few belongings, just what they could grab, and the minute they had to leave. One told KGMB he grabbed his father's ashes as he ran out the door. My family is safe. The rest of the stuff can be replaced. Another resident said, when I bought here 14 years ago, I knew that this day would eventually come, but the reality is sinking in now. Another said she could see fountains of lava in the community topping 100 to 125 feet. Asta Mikulius, a geophysicist with the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, told the Associated Press in a phone interview that there is no way to know exactly how long the eruption will continue. One of the parameters is going to be whether the summit magma reservoir starts to drain in response to this event. That has not happened yet, Mikulius said. There is quite a bit of magma in the system. It won't be just hours long eruption, but how long it will last will depend on whether the summit magma reservoir gets involved. And so we're watching that very, very closely. County, state, and federal officials have been warning residents all week that they should be prepared to evacuate, as an eruption would give little warning. Officials at the U.S. Geological Survey on Thursday raised the volcano's alert level to warning status, the highest possible, meaning a hazardous eruption is imminent, underway, or suspected. Well, it's pretty clear that they knew what was going on. And they knew that volcano was getting ready to blow. Nearby community centers have opened for the shelter. Ranson Yanetta, the recreation director for a Pahoa community center, was readying the gymnasium for evacuees after it was selected as a Red Cross evacuation center. He said the people who arrived first were hungry for information. They just want to know what's going on because they were told it's a mandatory evacuation, he said by telephone. The eruption comes after days of earthquakes rattled the area's Puna district. A nearby school was closed due to the ongoing seismic activity, and several roadways cracked under the strain of constant tremblers. A magnitude 5.0 earthquake was recorded hours before the eruption began Thursday. The Pu'u'o crater floor began to collapse Monday, triggering a series of earthquakes and pushing the lava into new underground chambers. The collapse caused magma to push more than 10 miles downslope toward the populated southeast coastline of the island. USGS geologist Janet Babb said the magma crossed under Highway 130, which leads to a popular volcano access point on Tuesday night. Hawaii County Civil Defense Agency closed the area to visitors on Tuesday and ordered private tour companies to stop taking people into the region. Most of Kilauea's activity has been non-explosive, but a 1924 eruption spewed ash and 10-ton rocks into the sky, leaving one man dead. Pu'u'o's 1983 eruption resulted in lava fountains soaring over 1,500 feet high. In the decades since, the lava flow has buried dozens of square miles of land and destroyed many homes. So there is a crisis going on in Hawaii that has some rather tectonic potentiality that the rest of the Pacific Rim probably should be paying attention to. Just saying. And we just came through the Scorpio moon, and here we go in the final degrees of Uranus and Aries, because again, we can always get a sense as to what's coming by what's happening in the final degrees of a planet transiting from one sign to another. And what did we just have? We just had a volcanic eruption. And what are we talking about here? We're talking about Aries, which is fire, and Taurus, which is earth and land. And once the magma cools, it becomes land. So this is a symbolic event. What's interesting is that Heather Eland and I talked about this together when we did the little video on what to expect with Uranus and Taurus. And I used this exact same example. The volcanic example of lava, which is ultimately liquid land, hitting the atmosphere, cooling, and becoming solid land. And when we look at Uranus and Taurus, I mean, I really feel like we're staring down some pretty significant Earth changes. These are big Earth changes coming in our direction. And I think what we're seeing here is a prelude to those Earth changes. Remember, Taurus is land. Taurus is the Earth itself. In fact, if the Taurus could have its own planet and be disassociated from Venus, Taurus's planet would be Earth. Right? So, just a little something for you to wrap your head around with a bit of the astrological tip and kind of an insight into where we're headed with Uranus and Taurus. Another little interesting tidbit, and this goes into, to some degree, Uranus and Aries to Uranus and Taurus, and to a large degree, Chiron and Aries, is the latest that's come out of the evolution or the de-evolution of the Boy Scouts. I don't know if you have been following the Boy Scouts, but one of the people that was kind of in charge of the Boy Scouts in America at one point was Rex Tillerson. And Rex Tillerson was in a position of power with the Boy Scouts when the Boy Scouts were literally being harassed because they did not want to have gay or homosexual scout leaders, wanted to keep them out of the fold. And Rex Tillerson was he was on board with changing the face of the Boy Scouts, that it wasn't going to be a strictly heterosexual affair. It wasn't strictly going to be, a strong heterosexual male leader to lead young men into some form of adulthood, right? I mean, if you think about the Boy Scouts, I think it was Boy Scouts was started by Teddy Roosevelt or something like that. Don't quote me on that, please. But the whole idea, right, is to give these young men experiences so that they could go out into the wilderness and, learn how to survive. And it's not as hardcore as Tom Brown's survival, but that's part of it. Learn how to survive in the wilderness, learn how to make things. There's also kind of a civic element that's connected to the Boy Scouts. It was kind of this secularized version of, rites of passage, gaining these badges, which were emblematic of passing things and, getting accomplishment. And then, of course, there was sort of the sort of the network or the framework of a group, which is, like a fraternity, and having some of those fraternal bonds become built out for the rest of your life. There is some level of kind of unacknowledged, ritualized activity, because we've lost touch with any rituals with our young men. Totally lost touch with that. The two rituals that have existed for young men in the 20th century that are outside of the family, these are socialized rituals, are football and the military. That's it. You either play football and you get tough and get the shit knocked out of you and stand up to your aggressor, to the person who's on the other side of the line who wants to bully you. And if you're halfway decent at it, you can get a scholarship, and it could actually, I suppose, help you at the next level by going to college. That's one level of initiation. The other is the military. Well, the Boy Scouts were kind of this, sort of unspoken, maybe slightly archaic kind of version of that. But we lost touch with it. Anyway, Tillerson opened up the floodgates when he was involved with the Scouts. And now they want to remove the name Boy from Scouts. And it's going to happen. It will happen. The march towards the mind lock of political correctness, right, started at one level. There's an induction phase. And the induction phase was, well, it's really important for you to observe your language and to treat everybody kindly, treat them universally, and make sure that by policing your language, you're also policing your thoughts. So you may be a closet racist, or you may have some vestiges of racism or sexism or whatever those things are. And they may be buried very deeply. Push came to shove. You might have to deal with a stereotype. If you got too drunk, maybe you blurt something out you'd be embarrassed by. Some people maybe not. Maybe some people maybe a lot more than that. If it's a lot more than that, I guarantee you they're not giving a shit about political correctness. But this is what happens. Oh, okay. I'm going to police this. I'm going to police my own thoughts because I don't want to offend this person. I don't want to offend this person. I want to offend this group. I don't want to offend that group. And so the next thing you know, we've got a cop living inside of our heads, which is really not the best prescription if you have any desire whatsoever to be liberated or free. But that's just the induction phase. And that induction phase probably lasted from right around, I'd say 1967, 68, maybe 69, 69. From 69 to 2006. Now it's next level. Now it's totally next level. And it's not just what you say, right? It's even what you wear, right? It's what you wear. There's a recent story with a young woman who went to her prom wearing kind of a typical Chinese, Asian silk kind of tight-fitting dress. You know the ones I'm talking about. And I wasn't being a perv, but she looked great in that dress. Like if that was my daughter and she wore that dress to her prom, I'd be proud of her. Because in a lot of ways, it's kind of a demure dress. I mean, yeah, if you have the body type that allows that dress to conform to, a set of curves that actually, fit into the dress, great. But other than that, it's kind of a demure dress. It goes down to the knees. It's not a lot of cleavage. So it's a pretty moderate dress. And she got torched, man. She got torched on Twitter because she was culturally appropriating that dress. You see, that's next level. It's not just what you say, but it's what you wear. When I lived in Oakland, I managed an apartment building in Oakland for 4 years of my life. It was one of the most bizarre, dark, empowering, important, insane times of my life. I could write a book just about those 4 years. So needless to say, most of the tenants that lived in the building were black. And for the most part, I had really great relationships with them. Really, really great. And there was this one gal who lived on the first floor, and she had married a guy from Mali. And she, no, I'm sorry, take that back. She didn't marry him. She had his baby. That's right. So I became friends with her and her sister, and started, kind of hanging out with them a little bit. And so she was importing like mud cloth. And she had this really cool mud cloth vest. And I'm like, man, I want that. I want that. So I got this mud cloth vest. And I started to wear it. And one of my favorite kind of combinations was wearing a black turtleneck underneath the mud cloth vest. And I remember one time I was invited to this tuxedo party. These people were kind of pretentious. It was a New Year's tuxedo party. And I wore the mud cloth vest with the black turtleneck. Nobody accused me of cultural appropriation. In fact, I actually did a whole life expo with this crew, and they were selling, their stuff, and I was selling music, and At the end, I did this performance with this guy. I was doing some DJ stuff at that time, mixing, doing live mixing. I did this performance with this guy from this group that Michael Franti was in originally, called the Beatnigs, Beatnigs. And he had this drum, and I was mixing some, some industrial sounds and some heavy tribal percussion. Man, that was cool. Nobody accused me of any kind of cultural appropriation. Like, it wasn't even on the radar. There was this miscegenation of styles and a fusion and a synthesis of genres and technologies and instrumentation. It was exciting. It was really exciting. And it was all over the place. Like, that's the time when I was really heavily into music. And one of the guys that was very interesting during that period was an artist by the name of Muslim Gaz. And he was from England, and almost all of his CDs had a theme that was connected to either Pakistan or Palestine. And he made a lot of people very uncomfortable with his music. And he was taking samples and doing percussion with doumbeks and a lot of Middle Eastern variations of rhythms and drums and hand percussion and stuff like that. And he was incredibly prolific. He was probably putting out a CD like every other month. And he died. He died of cancer. But, while he made people uncomfortable, I think that was the point. I think he was trying to make people uncomfortable and draw attention to what was happening in that part of the world, specifically Palestine. But nobody ever accused him of cultural appropriation. That didn't happen. Because in the spirit of experimentation and art and creativity, this is what you do. Look at the Temperance card in the Major Arcana, which is called the Art card in the Thoth deck, Crowley's Thoth deck. What do you see? You see all these different influences being mixed together. It's an alchemy of sorts. It's a creative alchemy. And what's really fascinating, this is what I find really fascinating. And this is kind of a sign of how fucked up our times are, okay? There is a corporate standard for the type of miscegenation that I'm talking about, right? It's like you can look at, well, hey, look, no borders. No borders. Let's mix it all up. Let's just mix it all up. Let's become a polyglot race. That's really encouraged. That is truly encouraged. And if you don't like it, you're hateful, you're ignorant. Well, quite frankly, if somebody wants to love somebody for another culture, another race, I don't care. I don't care. Do it. Hey, love, to some extent, man, love is love. Okay, it's true. It's true. But there's also the socially programmed version of it, right? There's the socially programmed version of it, which is we're going to force feed you this 24/7. And we're going to wrap your heads around it because this is where we are eugenically master mixing the entire planet. The whole plan is some kind of larger alchemical operation where there's no more duality because everybody is like some variation bronze. Okay? That's where it's all kind of headed. The golden race. And they can sit back and look, oh, look at us. We created the golden race. This was our grand social experiment. Look around. It's happening. I get, but you have to understand that it's happening from the top down. Okay, this is not some kind of spontaneous affair where people wake up and just say, "Oh my gosh, let's mix her up here." No, by and large, people tend to stick to their own communities. They stick to their own sorts of traditions, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Nation of Islam, they say, hey, look, we don't want to mix, right? I mean, really, they don't. What about Israel? Do they want to mix it up? No, they won't even allow refugees in there. They're looking at a social, religious, racial purity. What about the Mormons? Well, the Mormons are interesting because they go out and they find people from other countries, specifically Samoa or Tonga, and, places in Africa. And they go and basically recruit these folks, people from these countries, because it's part of their cosmology. Now, these are the fallen people. These are the fallen people, according to the Book of Mormon. They are called the Ebionites. And the Ebionites are here to be redeemed by bringing them into the faith of Mormonism. Redemption has occurred. But do they want to encourage a type of mixing? Somehow I don't think so. Although it does happen. So you have groups that are basically wired and saying, no, we don't want this. Right? And then you have other groups who on some level are, being force-fed and spoon-fed that this is the way it's going to be. Right? This is how it's going to happen. This is how it's going to occur. Meanwhile, if you're, Northern European and you're caught wearing an Asian dress, well, that's a no-no. You can't wear that. However, if you want to meet an Asian man and have a child with an Asian man, well, that's just fine and dandy. You can do that, right? Or if you're appropriating some kind of, moving forward. If I was wearing that mudcloth vest now, and I went out and did a YouTube video with the mudcloth vest on, boy, cultural appropriation. Who does he think he is? 57-year-old white guy wearing a mudcloth vest. However, if I married a woman from Africa and I had children between the two of us, well, boy, that's applauded. But I can't wear the mudcloth. You see where this is going? I mean, the whole thing is just completely insane. I mean, we're getting to a point where the level of insanity around this is just absolutely and utterly nuts. So we're talking about political correct thinking and the labyrinth that we have to navigate through it. I guess maybe if I did marry a woman from Africa and I did have kids, then I could wear the mudcloth vest. But that's a long way to go to wear a mudcloth vest, don't you think? I think so. By the way, I don't know what happened to that vest. I guess the ritual gods decided to remove it from me because it wasn't culturally appropriate. But I guess the same could be said for about 3/4 of my clothing at the same time after all the moves I've made. But the next level, right? The next level of the politically correct mind lock comes down to gender. That's next level. It's all been set up for the gender piece. Everything has been, moved along and accelerated towards the event horizon where we don't even know who we are as humans anymore. What's a human? What's a man? What's a woman? Can't even be a Boy Scout anymore. Chiron and Aries, hello. Can't even be a Boy Scout. What are they going to be now? What, the G Scouts? The Z Scouts? Man. Well, they have the Girl Scouts too, don't they? Are the Girl Scouts going to lose girl as well? How's that going to go down? It's just we're opening up these cans of worms, and they're being opened up on purpose. And I'm going to cover some of that in probably the second part of the show. First part of the show, I wanted to follow up on a couple of things. First of all, I received a comment about Kanye West, and it had to do with last week's show with me and Steve and Chris. And I made a comment that Kanye was hospitalized for a year, which was incorrect. And what I was trying to say, was that he was hospitalized and basically out of commission for a year. That's what I was trying to say. Because it was almost a year to the day when Kanye went into psychiatric supervision and then performed live for the first time. It was a year from November 2016 to November 2017. That's what I was referring to. So I stand corrected. Thank you. I appreciate being corrected because that lets me know that people are paying attention to what I say. And that's actually a good thing because I need to be responsible for what I say. And there was another thing I wanted to correct? Was there another piece? I think that was really it. I think that was it. Yeah. Okay. So let's move this thing forward. Okay, before we do that, right? Look at what Kanye West, whatever version of Kanye West this is. And people said that he had an addiction to opioids, which is what was going on with him. I could be. I'm not willing to dismiss that, but there were reports. This was coming out in February of 2017, where a buddy of his said that his memory is starting to come back. You lose your memory when you have electroshock therapy. They can erase 30 years worth of memory with electroshock therapy. Did you know that? 30 years worth of memory. It's a whole Saturn cycle. So I'm without having his medical report or the inside dirt, that's what they should do. They should storm, Kanye's doctor's office and grab his medical reports. They've got them already. They're on file. Everything's on file. They don't need to do that. But without having the explicit details, my sense is that he probably had some electroshock therapy. When you looked at him after he got out, there was nobody there. Absolutely nobody there. So now what is he doing? Well, he's, wandering off the res, and he's challenging these cultural assumptions about who he should believe in, be beholden to, and it's causing a ton of waves. And at the very least, it's interesting. But as I tried to point out, it's also part of this operation of duality. There's a lot going on there. Operation of duality. So let's talk about more duality. Let's talk about Trump. I wanted to do some follow-up on Trump yesterday. And I got another comment on YouTube that it seemed like it was fake news. Well, I would say yes. And what I'm referring to Trump's team led by Keith Schiller raiding Bornstein's office and getting his medical records. And was it because he mentioned that Trump was taking Propecia? Was it all about his ego, his lack of a lion's mane with a Leo ascendant? Was that it, or is there something more? Was Bornstein holding on to records that Trump's team didn't want anybody to get a hold of? Now, keep in mind that just a few weeks earlier, the feds went in and snatched all of Trump's legal records from his lawyer, Michael Cohen. So clearly this is a preemptive move on their part. And if that's the case, then what is President Trump, trying to hide? Well, I ran across two articles yesterday by Gordon Duff. And Gordon Duff is the editor for Veterans Today. I'm not a huge Gordon Duff fan. I mean, every time I listen to him, I want to take a shower. And Veterans Today has had some, at times, interesting and at times sketchy people. Like I think Kevin Barrett is on Veterans Today. I'm not a huge fan. I do like Preston James. Preston James is great. Whenever I have an opportunity to hear him on the radio or read one of his articles, he's interesting. Jim Fetzer used to be on VT, and Fetzer seems to get into arguments with people, big time arguments, and then kind of burns a bridge. Like he got into a major argument with Gordon Duff over a number of things, and then he left, and Duff just insults Jim Fetzer all the time. And then he got into an argument with Jeff Rentz, and he got into an argument with Rentz about Parkland. And I don't think he's going to be on Rentz anymore. Anyway, not a huge fan. Gordon Duff is on Rentz now. He's sort of taken Jim Fetzer's place. And it's weird because you can hear Gordon Duff breathe. It's totally weird. Anyway, he's got a couple of bombshell articles over on Veterans Today. And maybe I should just go there and read them to you. What do you think? Okay, so this actually coincides with something that I'd heard about Trump while he was running for president. And one of the rumors that I'd heard about Trump was that he has or had syphilis. And one of the things that we don't know about syphilis, or maybe some of you do, is that it is not entirely curable, and that a huge dose of penicillin can disable it, but it never fully goes away. And Trump had some kind of clear signs of later in life syphilitic deterioration, and part of it was the hair and his relationship with it. Not his relationship with the hair, but the actual growth pattern of the hair, which is quite bizarre. You know, it's like Trump and Don King have the weirdest hairlines of all time, I think. And they're buddies, by the way. So Gordon Duff went one step further than, look at Bornstein. Man, Bornstein's got great hair. Look at that guy's hair. I wonder if Trump has hair envy with Bornstein. Here, let me read this. Duff is a little caustic, but I'll read this. He also gets into North Korea. And he talks about North Korea being a project. Now, if you have this, so here's the thing about QAnon that I think actually is fascinating. There are more than one thing. There's more than one thing about QAnon being fascinating. QAnon will drop some interesting little truth bombs. Like he compared North Korea to Disneyland. And in essence, what we're going to find out or finding out is that North Korea, ever since the end of the Korean War, has essentially been propped up by the CIA as a rogue state because they have no money. They have no money, and they have, once Russia, who was a partner of theirs, essentially went under when the wall collapsed. They weren't getting any kinds of direct funding from Russia, or they weren't getting, certain types of fertilizers because apparently the soil in North Korea is terrible. They couldn't grow anything. So how could North Korea exist? Well, according to Duff, it was a CIA rogue state for a number of years. So when Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Il-jung, right? Is that his name? His father, when his father sent North Korean troops into places like Angola or Rhodesia, which he did, along with the Soviets and along with the Cubans, in order to, overthrow those governments, which they did, that was actually the CIA having a covert program where they could use a rogue state to destabilize other countries. And North Korea played that role when Kim Jong-un's father was running the country. So shutting down North Korea is basically the CIA saying that, well, we're not going to have a bifurcated rogue state, and maybe we'll just turn Korea itself into a rogue state, North Korea side. So this is one of the things that Duff talks about. Let me just go through this here. Duff says, suddenly North Korea surrenders in the same week where we learn that mob thugs working for Trump seized his laboratory reports and scared the hell out of an office filled with patients. Our guy says Trump has something. Is it AIDS? Now, this gets back into what I was talking about earlier, which was during the election, there was a murmur that Trump was exhibiting the signs of kind of late onset syphilis, which also can produce states of temporary madness, paranoia, and other, sort of emotional disjunctions. We had one comment here. Is it still in the chat room? What do we got? Judy, I have the same opinion of Gordon Duff. Yeah, I'm not a huge Gordon Duff fan. But again, I have to look. The guy is connected. I think he's a total. I think he's a reptile. Okay, but I want to continue to read this because, in the fairness of putting information out there and trying to understand a bigger picture, I think it's important that we can, listen to this and disseminate it and see if it actually makes sense. or we reject it outright. This is what is important. We can look at these things and try to align them. And by shutting it down, do we have the opportunity to do that? And the answer is no. I'm going to keep reading here. The report just hit, but the robbery was over a year ago. Why now? Is it because this is the week that a very meaty Trump is gay report hit VT and went viral despite bans by Gargle and Fakebook? So, again, this is nothing new that Gordon is actually, kind of moving forward. But people have talked about this for a long time. Who was one of Donald Trump's mentors when he was young? Well, two of his mentors were Roy Cohn and Liberace. And both were gay, even though Roy Cohn would never admit it. He was gay, and he was Donald Trump's big-time mentor. And Liberace was another one of his, spiritual teachers, I guess. I mean, look at Trump Tower. Look at his living space in Trump Tower. I mean, it looks like Liberace's interior decorator did the whole thing. So again, this isn't anything new. I mean, people have been kind of whispering around, that maybe Donald played, as a switch hitter. Well, he's a Gemini. Sun-Uranus conjunction. Okay, so let's continue. Duff says North Korea is now and has been for decades a CIA project nation. The Hermit Kingdom has been a front for covert U.S. activities in the region, as Gaddafi's Libya was. Gaddafi hosted U.S. Gladio training centers and arms depots from the late 70s onward with rogue CIA operatives and Irish terrorists. In fact, those who ran the Gladio Stay Behind program from Libya's safe haven. After 9/11, Gaddafi let the CIA take over, running torture prisons in Libya for thousands and using Libya as a way station for Afghan drugs under the rendition program. Later, Gaddafi offered Libya as home for Israel's chemical weapons program and allowed Israel to house nuclear weapons there. Eventually, Israel, according to sources at the IAEA, moved their nuclear arsenal to the Polisario separatist region of Mali. Our sources say the weapons used on 9/11 came from Mali stockpiles. North Korea, however, is quite a story. This was a Russian client state, as was Cuba. When the Soviet Empire crashed, this left Cuba with an agricultural economy and no patron. North Korea was far worse, totally vulnerable, starvation, few trade partners other than Israel and South Africa, a nation circling the drain. Then came the CIA. If you wondered why Mike Pompeo, as CIA director, found it so easy to fly to North Korea for secret meetings, something Trump bragged about in a tweet, he says, frankly, Trump should have kept his mouth shut. The CIA and other agencies have gone in and out of North Korea for years, a safe haven for projects of all kinds that could exist nowhere else on Earth. North Korea with no surveillance, no spies, no media is a dream come true. Placed in the middle of Asia's trade routes, overseeing Japan, China, and Asian Russian ports. The rumors have been there all along when Elon Musk recently joked that his Falcon 9 rocket was mistaken for an alien from North Korea. We got some great video. What we do know is that North Korea's economy totally crashed 27 years ago. They were no longer able to buy fertilizer from Ukraine, urea carbide, 40%, 7%, and ammonium nitrate, without which their depleted soil puts out nothing. The corporate world came to North Korea's rescue, as they did with Cuba. In Cuba, the drug mobs and Bain Capital, that's Mitt Romney's company, propped up the economy, laundering the world's drug cash through the Cuba, Cayman Islands, Mexico triad. For North Korea, it is something far more sinister, with security briefings for very few and those read in leaving astonished or skeptical. Is X-Files playing out in North Korea, or is it something worse? What we do know is that North Korea, like Osama bin Laden, is a branded boondoggie for cardboard Lotharios. Bin Laden had been dead since 2001 when he was re-killed just before totally unreliable, meaning honest, General Petraeus took over the CIA. If Petraeus had taken credit for the re-killing of Bin Laden, he might be president. Oh wait, he isn't a mobster, moron, and Israeli shill, so he had to be destroyed. If only he were here now, ready to enter the Oval Office. How many would choose him over Hillary or a light loafered Donald? What we do know is that burning down North Korea as a secret CIA asset is a move of desperation by those who run Trump. North Korea was invaluable, whatever the reason. South Korea had just jailed their U.S.-controlled mobster president, the last of the Yakuza Park family that pushed Korea to a civil war in the late 1940s, culminating in what we call the Korean War, which was in reality a civil uprising against U.S. occupation of South Korea on behalf of former Japanese collaborators. 300,000 South Koreans were killed by the U.S.-backed dictatorship between 1946 and 1950 before war broke out. Korea was the real Vietnam, and every word we were told of it is a lie, just like today. Now North Korea, as a CIA monster farm, is being burned down to save Trump from jail. He still has damage to do until his masters accident him out of the way. So I want to make a correction. Apparently, the raid on Bornstein's office happened a year ago, and now it's just coming out. So truly, it was a preemptive strike on the side of the executive office and Trump, because those records are containing something of significance. I mean, look, is Trump any different? No. Obama had no records. They're all sealed. Now, I want to talk about a bit of a process here. You know, we just learned that Trump is cutting funding to the white helmets. I think it's a great idea. Cut it all. Okay, cut it all out. This doesn't have to do with 5D chess. And it doesn't have to do with Trump as the mega, the crow mega. But it does have to do with, to some extent, his astrology. To another extent, perhaps a medical condition that he's actually going through. And there's a third component to this. Remember, Trump is a Uranus Sun conjunction person in Gemini. So we're not getting just, two personalities with Gemini. We're getting potentially multiple personalities. Or at the very least, radical versions of, the two or more persona that come through Trump with his Gemini Sun. So if that's the case, then what we've seen throughout his administration has been a consistent pattern of doing one thing and then another thing, one thing and another thing. We're pulling out of Syria. We're going to attack Syria. We're going to pull out of the TPP. Well, we're going to kind of revisit it. He's got one position on DACA, and then so yes, this is what politicians do. It's true, but not to the extreme of Trump. So we'll see this again. But here's my thing about Trump. I think we're all capable of having a Paul on the road to Damascus moment. And I actually do think Trump had that. I actually think he had it. And he's being compromised, and he's compromised himself, and his health might be compromised. I mean, there are a number of things here that a person's past can line up to become a huge obstacle to their present and even their future. And I'm not trying to give Trump an out. I'm not saying, oh, poor Donald Trump. But I think both things can be equally true. And I'm trying to come at this from that Sun-Uranus conjunction. And that the intention, and like when he gave that speech, that inaugural speech, you could say, well, he's just such a sociopath and a narcissist that he was able to imbue that with feeling. I don't think so. I don't think so. When he gave that speech was a very powerful speech, and it set the bar incredibly high. And if you were somebody who had any kind of investment in the type of world that Trump was looking at tearing down, that speech would have scared the hell out of you, and you would have gotten on the stick as quickly as possible to make sure that none of that ever happened. So go back and listen to the speech and see if you can sense some sincerity and some authenticity in what Trump was actually sharing during that time. It was a very interesting speech. Of course, it rained, which I don't think it had ever had. I'm not sure if it had ever happened, but it had been a long time. If it had happened before, when a president gave his inaugural address. Something happened between certainly then and now. And a lot of it has to do with compromise, and a lot of it has to do with his past catching up to him. And a lot of it has to do with like relationships and affiliations that he's had for a really, really long time. The world is a gang. The world is a gang. There's a series of gangs. The Democratic Party is a gang. The Republican Party is a gang. It's a gang of rich guys. It's a gang of social Marxist activists, right? A lot of whom are rich. Check out Nancy Pelosi's portfolio or Dianne Feinstein's portfolio. And one of these days, Elizabeth Warren's going to be filthy rich. They all get filthy rich. And they're all totally and thoroughly compromised. Trump was engaged in gang business, gang politics, gang real estate. Are you kidding me? New York City? Get your PhD in gang warfare in New York City. Let's watch that movie, The Gangs of New York. So this is, unfortunately, most presidents' relationship with their various gangs, whether it's skull and bones or whether it's an actual crime syndicate that Bill Clinton was raised in Arkansas. His father was Winthrop Rockefeller. His uncle, that's another gang. His uncle was, he was not a great guy. He's a drug dealer. He was a pimp. There's a lot going on down in Hope, Arkansas. So he's raised in a gang mentality. What do you think community organizing is? Community organizing is gang warfare using the rules and regulations of the Constitution with people in suits and ties that are subversively taking, a dagger to the system from the inside out and slashing the intestines of the system. It's a gang. Who did Saul Alinsky study under? Al Capone. Saul Alinsky got a degree in criminology, and he had a pretty substantial acquaintance with Al Capone. Why? He wanted to understand the mind of Al Capone. Because what can gangs do? Well, gangs have power. Gangs create leverage. That's what they do. They create leverage. What is a hedge fund? It's a gang. A hedge fund is a gang. It is a legal gang. And what do hedge funds do? They create leverage in marketplaces so that they can make a ton of money. So Al Capone knew all about leverage. He knew all about how to get into people, strike fear in the heart of people. You know, people are in a state of fear. They're polarized, man. He knew all about it. Saul Alinsky studied at the elbow of a master. And he read, The Prince by Machiavelli, and, he read Sun Tzu in the Art of War. He read everybody. And he looked at the principles of power, models of consciousness. Saul Alinsky, no matter what you think of him and his Luciferian brand of community organizing, it was fucking brilliant. Okay, he's an Aquarius. He's brilliant. You read some of Alinsky's stuff, you'll just sit there and shake your head and go, yeah, he's right. He's totally right. He understood group psychology, mass psychology. He understood the psychology of the individual. And he was going to use that because the ends justify the means. But ultimately, what was he creating? He was creating a gang of community organizers. And not even using one bullet, but the power and the influence of leverage, intimidation, fear, polarization, psychology. Boom. That's where Hillary Clinton, by the way, trained. She trained at the elbow of Saul Alinsky. So if you look at the lineage, of course, Alinsky has a number of masters. First and foremost, Lucifer, whom he dedicated his book to. But one of them is Al Capone. So if you look at, it's kind of like in football, they have a coaching tree. They have these coaching trees. And one of the famous coaching trees is the Bill Walsh coaching tree, because he produced so many coaches. Right? So many coaches that came off that tree. To this day, they're quite successful. Andy Reid being one of them in Kansas City, and Mike McCarthy in Green Bay, and John Gruden in Oakland, and on and on and on and on and on and on. And even Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco through his father, Mike, who was offensive coordinator under Bill. So that kind of lineage or that coaching tree exists in, it's like a flow chart in other groups, organizations, movements. So Hillary Clinton is one person removed from Al Capone. Just think about that. She's one person removed. So what Saul Alinsky was doing is he was transferring knowledge from Al Capone to Hillary Clinton. Do you get the picture? The world is a series of gangs. Look at Obama. When Obama was in Hawaii, he ran with a bunch of stoners. What was the name of his little group? The Choom Gang. Right? So even Obama was, clearly he was part of another gang. He was part of the Alinsky gang. He went from the Choom Gang to the Alinsky gang. He got called up. So this whole gang thing, I've talked about it for a long time. So of course, Trump, you're gonna have business dealings with people in New York. You're gonna have a freaking gang or gang mentality, because that's how you want to get into the real estate business in New York. You got to kiss some rings. Let me tell you, you got to kiss some rings. And you got to have a bulldog lawyer like Roy Cohn to take care of your messes. And you have to have a quick line of credit in order to pounce on certain properties and deals before anybody else does. You also have to be approved to get stuff, to actually get a building. Larry Silverstein. Larry Silverstein was in a bidding war with his brother-in-law for the World Trade Center. And Larry Silverstein's brother-in-law couldn't stand Larry Silverstein. Then all of a sudden, Larry Silverstein's brother-in-law decides that he's not going to buy the buildings. And he drops out. And not too long after that, he drops dead. That's right. I'm telling you, man, the world is it's kind of a cutthroat affair. And Trump was on the front lines of it in New York City. And now he's on, in Washington, D.C., which is a different kind of gang. It's not about real estate and power and leverage, but it does have power and leverage connected to it. Real estate, not so much. So let's disabuse ourselves of the notion that that presidents are pristine and clean. They're not. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the new electoral. I'm not sure we're going to have, to be honest with you, I'm not sure we're going to have an election in 2020. I'd be very surprised. I would be very surprised. The United States is going to go through its Pluto opposition. When Pluto was at 26 Capricorn, that was the right around 24, 25, 26. That was the time of the American Revolution. And Pluto's coming back around again. And we've got this Pluto-Saturn conjunction, which is big time in February of 2020. I don't know. I'd be very surprised if we actually elect another president. And I don't know what that means at this point. But just for a moment, right? Take your temporal body and put it into space-time and go out from this point, 2018, and go out to 2020. What do you feel? What's the sense of the future in 2020 from where you're sitting and resonating? Because remember, right? You're in a third dimensional body, but outside of this, you go past the lower fourth and the upper fourth, and you get to the fifth dimension, and you're out of space-time. There's still some density of space-time on the lower and the upper fourth, but you get into the fifth, and you're out of space-time, and that reality is happening right now. It's happening all the time around you. When we can understand this part of who we are, we can scale up through this dimensional awareness and move freely out of the cages of the body as a prison. The body's a great thing, don't get me wrong. I'm not ready to give mine up. But, there's some interesting things we can learn here still about the body and about what we're capable of. So what does it feel like to move towards 2020 in time-space? I don't get anything. I don't pick anything up. Now, that doesn't mean that I may not be here, although you never know. Knock on wood. But I'm not picking anything up for, the election, 2020. I'm not getting anything. I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you're watching this on YouTube and you take what I'm saying halfway seriously, you leave a comment on the YouTube side or leave a comment on the speaker side. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. What you think is happening and where we're headed. So I'm willing to cut Trump a little slack for being involved in, the real estate crime syndicate in New York City. I just look at who's been president and what they've been involved with. Look at the Bushes. One of the dirtiest families on the planet. And they're tight with the Clintons. The Clintons learn from the best of them. We're the worst. The Bushes, what was their cash cow? Cocaine, baby. Colombia. Zapata oil. Who do you think went in and took over the cocaine trade in Colombia? It was the Bush family. Bush sent troops down there. It wasn't because they were so involved with the American public, and they were so concerned. We just have to stem this drug flow, this drug problem. No, of course not. The Medellin cartel was cutting into their profits. That's why they went down there. Why do you think we went to Panama? Because Manuel Noriega wanted more money, or else he was going to spill the beans. I mean, the United States Army was like the Bush family's, private security force, protecting, their darkest secret asset. There's a crime family. That's a gang. I was trying to think of the Reagan example from yesterday. And the Reagan example I was trying to think of was when he was president of the Screen Actors Guild. And he did a huge solid to a guy by the name of Lew Wasserman, who was called The Last Mogul. If you have not seen the documentary on Lew Wasserman, The Last Mogul, I highly recommend it. It gives you some insight into the corridors of power and how things are done. Reagan was the president of the Screen Actors Guild, and at that time, if you were management, like if you were managing stars in Los Angeles, and you had a management company like CAA or something like that, you could not be involved on the studio side because it would clearly be a conflict of interest. The studios were thought to be these independent entities, and that the artists would have kind of equal shot at doing deals with these various studios. But if you were representing artists and you had a studio, then those artists would work with you at a discount. And then the other studios would be at a disadvantage. So it was almost like an antitrust violation. You could, it was kind of wired in there. Well, Lew Wasserman got Reagan to change that, which allowed him to take over, I believe it was MCA, and bring his clientele over to MCA with him. And so Reagan did Lew Wasserman a big solid. And Lew Wasserman was very influential in Ronald Reagan's political career. He helped him get elected as governor of the United States, governor of California, and then as president of the United States. And at the end of the documentary, Wasserman, who is interviewed extensively in the film, talks about a young man from Arkansas named Bill Clinton. He's very interested in. Of course he's interested. So again, I need to just be clear that we have to have our eyes wide open here. The problem with like Middle America, and don't get me wrong, I love Middle America. I'm living in a Middle American town where they spray Roundup all over the place. That's going to end, by the way. I have this vision. I'm sorry. I know it sounds megalomaniacal, but I have a kind of a vision of taking over this town. And I don't think it'd be too hard. No, I'm just telling you that I sat down right after I got here, and I sat down. It just happened, like randomly. I sat down with one of the guys who's running for mayor in this town. I recognized him. And I sat down with him and introduced myself. And there's only 3 people running for mayor, by the way. The incumbent, who I've heard is not so good. And these 2 other guys who are, let's just say they're pretenders. So I sat down with this one guy, and his name is Bobby Watson. I can say that. He's running for mayor. He's a public figure. So I asked him, I said, "Oh, hi, yeah, you're Bobby Watson. You're running for mayor." Well, what's your I asked him, "So what's your platform?" Well, first and foremost, I'm a conservative. I'm like, well, what the fuck does that mean? It's like code. It's like a secret handshake. I tell you, man, I wish I had the license to play music because I'd play Conservative by Iggy Pop right now. Anyway, I'm a conservative. Oh, great. Well, what it really means is that he's pro-business and whatever business is kind of running this town. And the business that's running this town is hospitality. It's hotels. They're putting in a hotel and a convention center. You get a hotel and a convention center in a town, look out. Massive, big hotel and a convention center. People will come here. They'll like it. They'll want to move here, right? Well, apparently that hotel got a massive, they're not paying, they're not paying property tax or something. They got like a property tax exemption because the idea is that they're going to employ people. It's going to bring jobs. But what kind of jobs are they going to bring? 25-hour-a-week jobs, 30-hour-a-week jobs? Are they jobs that people can actually, support a family on? No, likely not. They're building another hotel north of where I am, which is outside of the town, so it's a little unincorporated. And they're building dormitories there because they want to bring in their own workers. They won't even hire local people. First thing, if I was mayor, first thing I'd do is I'd start doing some redistricting. And I'd start extending the border of the town, to be honest with you. So, he said, this is where the conservatives are. It's like about business, allowing the business of hospitality to take over here, like kudzu. No, it's the business model for the 20th century, 21st century. Have a cute little town, and I like it. Don't get me wrong. I like it. Have a cute little town, turn it into a little gingerbread factory with some alcohol and a nice little getaway, the ambiance and the German flavor and feel, and then capitalize on it to the max, bring people in, but does it support the people here in this town? The answer is no. So I asked him, I said, so what do you think about 5G? He says, well, I know our internet connectivity needs to get better. I'm like, well, 5G is not all that great for you. And I began to explain 5G to him. He says, oh, we'll have to look into that. And this is one of the three people running for mayor. And he looks like, you look at him and you go, oh yeah, that guy could be a mayor. He's about maybe 6'1". He's got white hair, but most of it swept back. I don't know where he made his money, but he looks like he's got a little bit of money. He's got that kind of, the smell of money around him. He doesn't have the huge money smell, but he's got the smell of money around him. And as you look at that guy, go, okay, I can sign off on him. He's kind of one of us or whatever. But I just thought to myself, and I'm being really honest with you here. I'm not being egotistical. I'm like, this guy's really unimpressive. And he's running for mayor? He's running for mayor. So what would it take for somebody who actually had some smarts and some communication skills and could kind of see what's going on here, have a bit of a plan without being too threatening? It was so funny, right? The other day, I'm watching the grounds guy walk around here, and he's spraying Roundup everywhere. And there are kids in this apartment complex that are here. We just had a huge storm. And right after the huge storm, where's that Roundup going? It's going right into the groundwater. Right into the groundwater. And apparently they spray Roundup all over the city here. They have a little weed on the sidewalk. Somebody calls the city, hey, can you come over here? We got some weeds growing in the sidewalk. And then, some guy drops in like he's an astronaut from outer space with the Roundup gun, zap, 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 zippity zap. This has been going on for years, apparently. So, of course, I walk into the office. There's a woman there. And she's being mildly flirtatious. So, oh, well. So at least we have the mildly flirtatious vibe, which means I might be able to have a conversation. I can live with that. So I said, so I just wanted to ask you, what's going on with the spraying of Roundup around here? And she looked at me like, what? Roundup. So, well, I just saw the groundskeeper. He's spraying Roundup all over the place. I said, you know about Roundup? It's got glyphosate and, it's not great. It's really not great. It's a carcinogen. It wreaks havoc with chromosomes, hormones. It's really not very good. We have kids playing here. Is there any way that you can maybe go to a biodegradable version that's not so toxic? And she said, well, I'll definitely suggest it. So we started talking, and she asked me, where are you from? And I said, well, I was in Austin for 5 years, but originally I'm from California. And you should have seen the look on her face. Oh, great. Now I got him. Of course he's a Californian. He doesn't want us to spray our weed killer just like all those other Californians, right? And I said, but let's be clear. I'm not your typical Californian. First of all, I am not anti-gun. Second of all, I have no objection to hunting. Third of all, if you want to smoke, put cigarette smoke inside your body, I don't care. That's your choice, okay? That's your choice. If you are religious and you want to go to church, I have no problem with that. Celebrate it, rejoice. These are called personal freedoms. But when something comes in from the outside and impinges upon my personal freedom environmentally, then I got an issue with it. You can do whatever you want to yourself. And you're in Texas, and I'm living in Texas, and and hunting is big here, and guns are big here, and people smoke still in bars and restaurants here, right? I'm not going to change that. If I wanted something other than that, I'd go live somewhere else. Bottom line, end of story, right? Go live somewhere else. I'm not here to change the Texans. It's not. Because if I lived here, somebody's telling me, well, you got to change your lifestyle, I tell them to go fuck off. Bottom line. But what I am here to kind of look at is, number one, is the environment healthy? And I don't care if you're a Texan or you're an Iranian or wherever you're from and you're living here, you want to have a healthy environment. Bottom line of the story. Because we all have to share that together. What you do individually in terms of your lifestyle, that's up to you. Right? I'm living here. I don't presume to tell you anything about what to do or how to live. I would never, ever, ever do that. It's kind of why I left California in some ways. I mean, there were some good things about California, don't get me wrong. But I was running into more and more resistance. I had this one girlfriend, and she nearly broke up with me because I had certain condiments inside my refrigerator door. I swear to God. She saw some of the condiments. It was like, they were as bad as Roundup. And I don't think they were. I'm pretty conscious about the condiments I pick. Truly I am. And I drove a big gas guzzler. That added a lot of stress and strain to our little relationship that didn't last all that long. But don't tell me what to do. Don't try to change me. If I come to some epiphany about my life, my lifestyle, and I want to change it, great. But the outer stuff, that's the stuff that's important because it affects everybody. The fracking of the water, the fluoride that's in the water, the Roundup they're spraying all over town, the 5G grid that they're going to build all around this place. You see, I've got an investment in stuff like that. Or even to the extent that it would be great if we had actual sustainable businesses here that made something. What a concept. Making something, not just putting somebody up and making sure there's a nice mint in their pillow, or creating a $12 frozen margarita that they can walk around town with, which you can. I don't even really have a problem with that. I mean, that in and of itself serves a purpose. People want to experience that, fine, whatever, great. But it's ultimately not something you can build around, you know? Have a little vision here. All right, I'm done with that rant. By the way, by the time I was done with the woman at the front desk, she said, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, "Well, how cool and open are you?" And she said, "Oh, I'm very cool and open." And I said, "I'm an astrologer." And she said, "Oh, I love that. I love that." I was like, "Really?" And she actually knew what an astrologer was. I was like, wow. You know, life is really ironic. I lived in Austin for 5 years, and you would think Austin was kind of a hip place, right? For 5 years, I would tell people I was an astrologer, and I'd either get the Christian stare, which bordered on bemusement and disgust, or I would get the enthusiastic reply asking me if I worked at the university. And then I had to explain to them further that an astrologer was different than an astronomer. But in the short amount of time that I've been here, like the astrology thing has like kind of popped in a weird kind of way. You know, like I've got a trade set up now with a local acupuncturist. I've been here 3 weeks, and I'm swapping readings for acupuncture treatment. 2 days ago, I was sitting in front of this health food store called the Peach Basket, and I was hanging out there with Kim, and we're having little juice. And all of a sudden, this woman walks by me, and she has this weird look in her face, like she's looking at me, like trying to connect me somehow. And about a minute later, she puts her groceries back in her car. She comes over to me and she says, "I think I know you." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She said, I said, "You mean like the internet?" She said, Yeah. It's Rem. I said, "Oh." I said, "You mean me, the astrologer?" "Yeah, that's right. You're on Regina Meredith." And so here I am in flyover. I've been here a month. I'm sitting down, and somebody actually recognizes me. Now, how weird is that? I lived in Austin, this supposedly hip place, the left coast, for 5 years. And, I was undercover. I was in the witness protection program in Austin, apparently. Life is strange, isn't it? It's really, really strange. In a good way sometimes. Paradoxically strange. All right. I got to go do a reading. I'm going to do one of my everything readings in about 45 minutes. I guess I could prep for it. There was another thing I wanted to talk about today, which was kind of important. It has to do with propaganda. It has to do with social programming. And it has to do with this ongoing theme of what's happened to men. I think I'll save it for now. I'll save it for now. And maybe we'll circle back on next week on one of the Friday FARcast. Oh, did I do 15 minutes of flame today? I think I might have. Today's supposed to be the Friday FARcast. By the way, the reason why I did 15 minutes of flame, because I'm changing the name of 15 minutes of flame. I'll change it in the header. I just got because I found I could not get the domain 15 minutes of flame. It was taken, believe it or not. So I changed the spelling to 15 minutes of OV flame. And that's the way it's going to be from here on out, because now I have the domain 15 minutes of flame. And there's going to be a website where there's going to be a whole other level of interactivity for this podcast. I'm liberating it from robertphoenix.com. It's going to have its own place and space, and maybe even my own Twitter handle with 15 minutes of flame. So keep your eyes out for that. I just had that on my mind today, which is why I think I put it in there in the subject line. But we'll be back on Monday night with that, and Sunday night with the 11th house. And one of the things I'm going to talk about on the 11th house this week is I'm a big fan of old film. And I've been watching a lot of old film. I actually got that from my father. He was a huge old film freak. So I was looking at, film stars from the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. And I was looking at their astrological signs. And what I found to be very interesting was that the majority of film stars that we really kind of know from that period, really up into the 40s, 30s, 40s, and maybe early 50s. That those film stars, a lot of them were either Aries, Taurus, or Gemini. Really fascinating stuff. And I was checking this out last night. William Holden is an Aries. Glenn Ford is a Taurus. If I'm not mistaken, Gregory Peck is, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's a Taurus. John Wade, Gemini. Jimmy Stewart, right on the cusp of Taurus, Gemini. There are a few others. Errol Flynn is a Gemini. Gary Cooper is a Taurus. And I thought about this, and I'm like, well, this is really kind of interesting. Because if you look at those guys and what they theoretically stood for, is a lot of them were solid. Of course, they played bad guys, like Glenn Ford, 410 to Yuma plays one of the best bad guys in cinema. They could all play a bad guy, but they could also portray somebody extremely solid. Gary Cooper, the guy's rock solid, right? He's a Taurus. Glenn Ford, Taurus. William Holden, man of action. Aries. And then you have the few Geminis that come into play. So I'm going to talk about that on the Sunday night show, and how that vision of masculinity that's been portrayed in cinema and, sort of the middle part of the 20th century was really defined by those first three signs. And what's interesting is as you move outwards and you get the stars of the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, the signs become quite different. And that's not to say everybody was first decan and then moving out to the other decans. Of course, there's some crossover. But if you look at Burt Lancaster, he's a Scorpio. Robert Mitchum's a Leo. Paul Newman, if I'm not mistaken, is an Aquarius. So there's this movement towards sort of the outer signs when they're, it's just fascinating. It's fascinating. So we're going to get into that a little bit, and we're going to explore some of that on Sunday night show. All right, I think it's a wrap. Let's see what we have. Who's in the chat room? We got one more comment here. We have Judy. Yeah, I thought Dallas would be a hit place when I was there. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you just get surprised by the location of where you're at and what comes out of it. But let me just say this. I want to, I always want to kind of end the shows on something positive. And what I want to say is that, we're finally shaking the awakening. We're shaking the awakening. And the awakening process is looking at what's going on in the world around us. And that part is valid and real. But there's also an awakening process that's going on inside of us. As we move through the chains of our past, and we move through the conditioning and the programming that we can see being put into play every single day. It's a reminder of what's gone on inside of us. And how no matter where you are in your evolution, that it's always important to challenge the assumptions that you were born into and have been enculturated with over the course of your existence. One of the things that we've lost touch with is our will and our ability to make things happen, right? I've talked about this. Free will versus true will. That's a big part of it. It's a really, really big part of it. But another part of it, and this is inside the equation, is that a number of us have made not so many great choices. And what happens when we make choices that self-sabotage ourselves or self-sabotage us? We experience a diminution of will. We become either less risk averse, we climb into a cave or a shell, and we just ride it out because we're afraid to screw up. And that's actually not a bad thing to do for a while. You know what I'm saying? If you continually do the wrong thing over and over again, maybe you should take a break for a while and really examine why you're doing the wrong thing over and over again. And not enough of us actually do that. And part of this experience here for me is that's what I'm going through. And I'm looking at my life. I'm looking at choices, both good and bad. Where did I sell myself short? Where did I give in too easily? Where did I not have enough of a fight? And if I didn't have enough of a fight, why didn't I? Where was I not clear? What was holding me back? What was my fear? What were my triggers? And this is, we could look, this is my process, but it could be your process too. Because I know a lot of people that listen to this show or don't even listen to this show that look at their lives and say, I'd like my life to be better. I'd like my life to stand for something. I'd like my life to impact other people's lives. And I wholeheartedly support that and applaud that. And not just one side can offer that up, right? Like you look at the liberal and the progressive side, and there tends to be this feel good. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. And the yes, we can is based on what? It's based on a number of social integers, a number of social bullet points, integers, that if you align with them, that they become sort of your secular humanist philosophy or moral code, but they're socially driven. There's another version of that has to do with the individual. And it's not about the social ideal that's propped up. I think that's the cart before the horse. That's the south node before the true node. Now, you could look around and say, well, they're spraying Roundup in this town and I want to do something about it. I don't think that's a bad thing. But to look at a smorgasbord of issues that are associated with a amalgam of groupthink and then assign your inner worth or your inner value to them, and that goes for the right as well, then I think you're missing the boat completely. Completely. So let's reverse the polarity, and the yes you can or the yes we can is about our lives and what we want to do with them. Even in a time where there's so much chaos going on. Is the economy going to be stable? Is it going to fall apart? Is the dollar going to fall? Are we going to go to this digital thing? Clearly the trends are headed towards yes on that. And I'm not going to bullshit you, right? watching a Sprint commercial and having this guy, the "Can you hear me now" guy, "Can you hear me now," who used to work for Verizon, now working for Sprint. He's got a little sidekick, and she's showing him, the dude, the old guy, how to sign in with their face on the phone. So this stuff is coming. It's happening. Sweden's getting rid of just about all their cash. So let's be clear about this. It's not like it's 1999. The technological ball has been moved ahead drastically. But at the same time, we're also here and we're living our lives. And until further notice, right? You need to live your life. It's always good to have a little something on the side. In case things get a little wonky, of course. But if more of us move forward, right? As if, then we have a better chance of actually perhaps being successful and creating a different kind of model. And what's kept us from that? Well, it's been our conditioning, both in this lifetime and in other lifetimes. It's the thought forms, right? It's the archons. It's all these things that come in and jam our frequencies. And we have an opportunity to disentangle from that stuff. I'm telling you. Because we're in a time of chaos. If you're in the corporate world and there's chaos, shit, you love that. Like inside of the corporate structure, some chaos is really good. People move around, people get upgraded, people get kicked out. It is Machiavellian. In that place, oh yeah. Politically, the United States loves chaos, promotes it all over the planet. And I'm not saying that, you want to be in chaos. I'm just telling you it's part of a process. Don't be afraid of it. It is here now. And as part of that process, we can unbuckle ourselves from the stratified thought forms, from the stratified ways of being, the shoulds, where you sold yourself out, where you could have been better, where you could have made better choices, right? This is a great time. And let's just play this out so that we have the end game involved. And let's say you figure it out. Let's say you've like pulled the wiring apart, excuse me, and you're rewired and you're making choices that are going to feed you, and that you're not going to leak. You're not going to leak your essence. You're not going to douse your flame, and that you're going to do everything in your power to protect it and nurture it, and not egoically. You do that. If you could do that, and you could do that for a consistent period of time, however long that is, and let's say the lights go dark in this place and it's game over, well, guess what? At least you're taking that with where you're going next. Okay? So nothing is for naught. Remember that. In the best case scenario, we untangle, we rewire, we reconnect, and then something new comes out of it. And if enough of us do it, then we reclaim our will, and we were able to reclaim what we could do in this place without fear, without subjugation, without the clamoring voices of our parents or our teachers or the people that we assign some value to love us, and for whatever reason became a critic and reminded us of who we weren't. This is the time, all right? Untangle, untangle, untangle. Face your fear. Get through it. Let's regroup. There's still time left, okay? There is still time left. It'd be great. Start a business. Write a book. Make a documentary. Open a food truck. And if you're a millennial and you're listening to this, take it as gospel. Take it as gospel, because you're in the middle wave right now, or you're at the head of the wave. You guys are going to be responsible for helping create where we're going to go next. And some of the ideas that you have I think are great. Others, let's sit down and have some water over it with. All right, I'm going to get out of here. We'll be back on Sunday night with 11th House live stream. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to accept what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality. We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.